Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something pretty fascinating, I think. It's called autoethnography. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah. It's a really interesting approach. It's where researchers, really dive deep into their own lives to try to uncover like broader truth.
And we've got a really powerful example of this today. A researcher by the name of Ken Nguyen Trung, he used autoethnography to kind of cope with loss during the pandemic.
Yeah, his story is really something. He shows how mixing your personal experience with research, it can really lead to like some amazing big changes.
So, first things first, like, what even is autoethnography? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, it's a kind of qualitative research.
Yeah.
So, that means it's about experiences and meanings, not so much like hard numbers. And the researcher, they're kind of like the subject and the observer at the same time.
So it's like they're writing a memoir, but like way more analytical.
Exactly. And that's where Nguyen Trung's story comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so imagine this.
Yeah.
You're stuck in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Pandemic's raging, and you can't get back to Vietnam to be with your grandfather who's sick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to him. And sadly, his grandfather passed away, and he couldn't be there. So he's dealing with, just a ton of grief and loss.
Oh, man, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and right in the middle of all that, he starts using autoethnography to, like, process everything. It becomes his way of making sense of it all. He even wrote 2 articles about it during this time, all about like grief, loss, and how the pandemic affected him.
So he turned this really tough experience into like actual research. That's incredible. What kind of things did he learn from doing that?
One of the big things is this idea of habitus. It's from this sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu. It's like, imagine a fish swimming in water. The fish doesn't even realize the water's there until, it's out of the water. And it's the same with us. We take things for granted until something big happens and shakes things up. Like, think about a time when your own water changed.
Yeah.
What did that teach you?
Yeah, that makes sense. And for Nguyen Trung, it was, well, everything, right? The pandemic, being separated from his family, losing his grandfather, that all forced him to really think about things differently.
Exactly. And he talks about how he felt like social media was just bombarding him with fast food for thought, kept him distracted from actually dealing with his grief.
Yeah, I get that. I think a lot of people feel like that, especially these days.
For sure. And for Nguyen Trunk, it was writing that helped him, putting his thoughts and feelings down on paper. That's how he reconnected with himself and started to, like, appreciate how precious life is.
So autoethnography was like his way of healing.
I think so, yeah. He turned this really painful experience into something with meaning, something that other people could connect with.
And it's not just personal, right? His story makes you think about how academia works, too.
Yeah, you're right. Like, how much empathy is there? Especially when it comes to giving feedback. He's a young scholar and he's from the global south. So he had to deal with a lot of challenges, like trying to fit into Western academic standards.
He even mentioned that he got criticized for using I in his work, like reviewers saying it wasn't academic enough. Ugh, I've been there. Sometimes the feedback can be so harsh, it's really discouraging.
It's like everyone's a critic, right? But what if, instead of just focusing on what's wrong, we try this yes and approach? Like, you acknowledge the good stuff, the unique perspective someone brings, and then you build from there.
I like that. It's way more supportive, right? Like everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas,
Yeah,
even if they're kind of personal.
exactly. And that's what's so interesting about what happened with Nguyen Tran. When he shared his autoethnography, people loved it. They were so positive. They saw how brave he was to be so vulnerable.
He even shared some of the feedback. Like one reviewer said, "Your vulnerability is palpable. Thank you for sharing so much." Powerful stuff.
All right. Makes you think, what if academia was more open to that kind of vulnerability?
That would be amazing. And that brings us to another big takeaway from Nguyen Trung, I think. Writing his story, it wasn't just good for him, it helped other people connect with him.
Oh, absolutely. He said that colleagues reached out to him, sharing their own stories about struggling during the pandemic. It reminds you that we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
We all go through tough times.
Totally. We all need connection, especially when things are hard.
And it's a two-way street. When we open up, it gives other people permission to do the same, creates this sense of community.
So from Nguyen Trung's experience, we can see there are like three main parts to autoethnography.
Yeah, the first one is honesty. You got to be real, be vulnerable in what you write. Don't be afraid to share who you are, you know, your true feelings, your perspective.
Okay, what about that second part? Reflexivity, is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's it. It's like being able to see your own story from the outside, like you're still in it, but you can step back and analyze it. You ask yourself tough questions. You challenge your own assumptions, your biases.
So you're the storyteller, but you're also kind of the analyst too. That's cool.
Right. And then the third part is care. Taking care of yourself and caring for others. It's about understanding that we need to look after ourselves, but also offer that same care and empathy to the people around us.
It's like this beautiful exchange, right? Compassion and understanding going back and forth. So through honesty, reflexivity, and care, Nguyen Trung was able to take this experience of grief and loss and turn it into something that really connected with people. It helped him heal too.
That's what's so great about autoethnography. It can be super personal, but it can also connect with people on a bigger level. It can start conversations,
Ah.
maybe even lead to change.
And in his second article, there's this moment where he talks about seeing his grandmother again after 4 years apart.
Oh, yeah, that part gets me every time. It's like, even with all the sadness, there's still this love that lasts.
After everything he went through, that must have been so powerful.
It shows us that even when we experience loss, there's still hope, still connection. And that leads to something we want to ask you, the listener. How can you bring more vulnerability and empathy into your own life, personally and professionally?
Something to think about, for sure. How can we cultivate those qualities in ourselves and in how we treat other people?
Maybe it starts by being more aware of our own habitus, right? Like, what are we taking for granted? How can we challenge that and be open to new ways of seeing things?
And maybe we can be more intentional about how we give feedback. Can we use that yes and approach? Recognize the good stuff while still offering helpful suggestions.
Creating spaces where people feel safe to be themselves, without feeling judged.
Because when we share our stories, it opens us up to connection, understanding, and maybe even real change.
Nguyen Trung's work shows us that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a strength.
It's when we're open and honest about our experiences that we can really connect with others. And that makes the world a more empathetic and compassionate place.
So if you're feeling inspired, I say, pick up a pen, open your laptop, and start writing. Explore your own story. See where it leads you.
And something else that really stood out to me from Nguyen Trung's work was how open he was about the struggles of being a scholar, from the global south.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, he talked about getting criticized for not fitting into those, like, Western academic norms. And even, like, some people questioned his English.
Wow. That's going to be frustrating. Makes you think, like, even in academia, it's not always a level playing field, right?
For sure. It raises some big questions, like whose voices get heard, what kind of knowledge is considered valid. It's like, Nguyen Trung's experience shows us that there are still these, like, barriers and biases in academia.
Yeah, we got to be more aware of that, actively look for different perspectives.
Absolutely. We need to be open to different ways of knowing and sharing knowledge.
And Nguyen Trung also talked about how important mentors are, especially in academia. Like, he got such encouraging feedback from some editors and reviewers. He said that really helped him grow as a researcher.
That's so important. It shows how much even little acts of kindness can matter. We can all help create a more supportive and inclusive environment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into autoethnography and transformation, what's the one thing you really hope people listening take away from Nguyen Trung's story?
I think it's that reminder that, our personal experiences matter a lot. They shape who we are, how we see the world, the contributions we make. And autoethnography gives us a way to, like, really explore those experiences.
Actually make sense of them.
Yeah. And it's not just about looking inward. When we share those stories, we connect with other people, we build empathy, and that can spark real change.
So if you're feeling inspired by Nguyen Trung, pick up a pen, open your laptop, and just start writing. Explore your own story, your own path, see where it takes you.
You might be surprised what you find out about yourself and about the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into autoethnography. Until next time, keep exploring, keep sharing, and keep diving deep.